phone think it's 7 o'clock?
You're welcome.
Oh, okay. Very excited about trying to start this one right on the nose of 7. I don't usually. Yeah, exactly. You can't start these things early because people might be expecting the broadcast at there, but it's 7. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the January 8th, 2018 Lake Washington School Board meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve the January 8th agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved by Director Liberty and seconded by Director Bleasner. I understand we have one of the items we'd like to pull from the consent agenda.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we move the vote on the salary issue to the non-consent agenda, just for the purpose of being able to speak to it.
Okay. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other edits? Hearing none. Okay, so with that amendment, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Which brings us to our host school, Dr. Pierce.
Great. Well, we are very excited and honored to have Victor Scarpelli, principal of Environmental and Adventure School here. EAS is our host school this evening, so welcome, Victor. We'll have you step forward. I know you've got some team members here with you as well, so we will turn it right over to you.
Well, you guys want to all line up here? We're ready to go? Are you going to do it one at a time? Oh, no moral support? All right, we'll get started then. Well, good evening, school board members, Dr. Pierce, teachers, district administrators, students, parents, and the Lake Washington School District learning community. I am Victor Scarpelli. I am the proud principal here at Environmental and Adventure School. And as always, I'm honored and excited when asked to talk about one of my school's programs and the strategies we are using to improve student learning. We are very proud of Environmental and Adventure School and the wonderful students, teachers, staff, parents, and community that make up the EAS family. I would like to especially thank those that worked hard to plan for this evening, our PTO for the refreshments, helping us set up the boardroom, and arranging for our students to be here. I would like to thank Brian Healy, our lead teacher, and the many teachers, administrators, staff, students whose work is showcased here this evening. As we begin our 19th year at Environmental and Adventure School, our shared vision is still academic achievement, community building, stewardship, challenge, and support for all learners. At EAS, our mission is that students achieve academic, personal, and social goals in a challenging educational program. The environmental focus encourages students to participate in creating and maintaining environments for learning and living. Students benefit from a sense of belonging, purposeful learning, and opportunities to develop as leaders, stewards, and responsible citizens. At EAS, students thrive in an educational community that involves our parents, our local businesses, and organizations as partners in teaching and learning. As you will see this evening, our school's mission, vision, and beliefs and practices are in alignment with our districts in regard to connection, value, and challenge. At EAS, we continually align our academic curriculum and adventures with the district and Common Core state standards. Our teachers have also spent time analyzing district classroom and state assessment data to determine academic trends and establish teaching and learning goals as stated in the Continuous Improvement Plan. During the process of analyzing, assessment results, our teachers meet and consult during the school year in their professional learning community team. These transition meetings occur during our leap time and have been very beneficial to the development and building of our school's continuous improvement plan. We are working very hard to create an environment with high expectations and one that is student-centered to meet the unique needs of our 11 to 14-year-old student. So tonight, you will learn about our great academic program and the opportunities EAS provides students to become knowledgeable contributors to their community. We are very proud of our students, our teachers, our staff, and our administrative team for their many accomplishments, and we are very grateful for the opportunity to help and for your support of our school. So thank you, Lake Washington School District School Board, for this opportunity to highlight our school and your support of EAS. And now I'd like to introduce our lead teacher, Brian Healy, who will begin our presentation.
Thanks, Victor. Good evening. Almost 8 years ago, when we last presented to the board, we focused on the reasons for creating a school based on environmental themes. We're very pleased to report to you that in our 19th year, EAS continues to provide Lake Washington students with a unique and engaging educational experience that espouses the guiding principles of our district student profile, those of connection, value, and challenge. Tonight, our staff and students will paint a vivid portrait of how we accomplish this. One hallmark of EAS is the multitude of ways that members of our learning community, students, staff, parents, and community partners are connected in meaningful relationships that foster student success. Connection refers to the interconnected learning experiences, personalization, and attention to students as individuals. The majority of our units are connected to common school-wide themes that are shared across multiple subjects. This allows students to make connections between the critical concepts when they move from class to class. The learning doesn't necessarily stop when they leave one classroom, then start anew when they enter the next class. It continues from one to the next. Here in the boardroom, we have some examples of cross-subject integrated work products displayed tonight. For example, this year's school-wide theme is, Where Have the Salmon Gone? In science classes, EAS students studied the physical and chemical properties of water. Then they investigated the life cycle of salmon, along with the natural and man-made challenges that impact them. In the back of the room on the rack are displayed timelines of a Chinook salmon's life based on a detailed 23-page narrative they read. Excuse me, that's in the back corner. Concurrently, they learned about watersheds in social studies, with student groups investigating the regional North American watershed. This included the historical Native American tribes of the watershed, the history of its settlement, major cities, industry, and culture. In language arts class, they read Holling's classic story, Paddle to the Sea. The students then worked in groups to integrate their science, social studies, and language arts learnings to collectively author a 15 to 20-page narrative story of an object traveling from the headwaters of their watershed to the ocean. The story included concepts and vocabulary from all three subjects. The students illustrated their work with original artwork that demonstrated the skills and concepts learned in art class. Their final published booklets are displayed in the rack in the back. They look like this. It's beautifully illustrated. If you have a chance, take a look at those. Now I'd like to introduce Laura Mangov, an 8th grade member of the Osprey clan, who will share how some thematic learnings were connected for her. Laura?
Going back to my 6th grade school-wide theme, Becoming Us, is an easy way to show how EAS connected our theme of becoming us, not only as a nation, the US, but us as individuals through each and every one of our classes. For instance, in our STEM and science classes, we study different systems in the body, which make us up physically. In our social studies and language arts classes, we learned about different learning styles as well as the differences between the left and right brain. To complete this, we also did an art piece showing our own personal features in each side of our brain.
Thank you, Laura. EAS is a small learning community where many strong relationships are formed during a student's 3 years here. Students, teachers, and parents form strong, positive relationships based on trust and shared learning experiences. Student-to-student connection through advisories, we call them clans, each led by a teacher that students belong to for the entirety of their 3-year EAS experience. You see the banners of our 5 clans displayed tonight in front of the board at the dais. Each year, the clans compete for the EAS Clan Cup by earning points, much like in Harry Potter novels. Connection across age groups to multi-age classes, where students mentor and learn from each other, is a primary advantage to multi-age classes because they allow students to fit in. Every student is on a different learning trajectory for writing, reading, math, interpersonal skills, etc. Multi-age grouping allows students to find their niches in each of these and assume roles of both mentor and learner. Now I'd like to introduce Marcus Rose, who will speak about personalization.
Our small school size of 142 students allows personalization through a variety of student groupings and clans, classes, excursions and service learning, and other activities. Teachers get to know each and every student well. During our weekly 2-hour collaborative staff meetings, we intentionally evaluate the progress of every EAS student, allowing personalization of their education and the implementation of strategies to assist them in reaching their potential. Our Wednesday Electives program offers 5 6-week elective sessions each year. During the year, this program provides 20 to 30 elective course choices. Wednesday Electives allows students to explore current and new interests in a wide variety of topics. Classes are generally taught by parents and community partners, but students also conceive, develop, and teach classes to their peers. Our office manager, Colleen McLaughlin, will now share another valuable aspect of connection at EAS.
EAS parents are very connected, which is often difficult in the middle school years. They participate in our school excursions, elective offerings, and school events, not only as chaperones, but also as instructors, mentors, and learners. Our parents fulfill key roles in a wide variety of school activities. They volunteer to drive students to many off-campus activities, they lead and chaperone Wednesday elective sessions, and they serve as camp staff during excursions. As camp staff, parents lead skill development sessions and supervise students. They also cook and organize camp gear, including tents, kitchen materials, and tools. Parents are also instrumental in organizing our health fair, supervising community stewardship work, and helping our office staff in a multitude of ways. Each EAS family commits to contributing a minimum of 25 hours volunteer time each school year to benefit the whole school, with many families exceeding this annual commitment exponentially. The strong involvement of our parents allows us to offer powerful out-of-the-classroom experiences for our students. Personally, my initial experience with EAS began in a parent role when my now 24-year-old son enrolled as a 6th grader in 2004. As a parent, I quickly learned how valuable the strong connections between EAS students, teachers, and parents enrich the overall academic experience for EAS students. We have heard this same sentiment over and over again throughout the years from our many former and current EAS families. Our Spanish teacher, Kirsten Boone, will now describe our connections to the wider community.
EAS students are connected to their community through our community stewardship projects, also known as CSPs. This service learning program allows our students to make meaningful contributions to their community. During 3 separate 4-day sessions each year, students are actively involved in both environmental and social stewardship in their community. They perform environmental stewardship in city, county, and state parks, where they build and maintain trails, remove invasive vegetation, and replant with Northwest native plants grown in our own greenhouse. They also mentor 3rd and 4th grade students from Sandburg and Thoreau Elementaries, developing lesson plans and materials to teach them environmental concepts through creative games. EAS students perform social stewardship by working with disadvantaged and displaced populations through partnerships with Northwest Harvest, St. Vincent de Paul, and other recent relief organizations. During their 3 years at EAS, each student completes over 140 hours of stewardship. To date, EAS students have completed over 90,000 hours of community stewardship. Our community stewardship projects help students realize that as middle school students, they can make significant positive differences and contributions in their communities. In talking with our alumni, we found that many of them have continued to volunteer in their local communities as adults. This is certainly a satisfying ripple effect. Now I want to introduce Kazuma Taguchi, an Osprey 8th grader, who will share some of his CSP experiences.
EAS helps a lot of people, but not everyone sees the full picture of our society. There are people who need help to survive. Last year, I worked at the St. Vincent de Paul food warehouse organizing and distributing food packs. That week, I saw a part of the society that I wasn't really aware of. I realized many of us are privileged and have most everything we need. Working with the needy ones opened my eyes to issues I've heard about but really haven't thought about. I'm a much better person because of that.
Thank you, Kazuma. We have some powerful evidence that our students feel strongly connected to our EAS community, even as they venture out into high school, college, and adulthood. At our week-long September and June camps, the 10 to 20 counselor positions are entirely filled by EAS alumni. It even gets competitive as they want to sign up early to get a spot. Some start as high school juniors or seniors, but most are college age, spending their last week or first week of their summer vacation with us. Our 15-year celebration in 2013 turned into an amazing reunion when over 150 alumni returned to join us for the day, which then extended into the evening and a campfire in the courtyard. During that campfire, many 20-something alumni became campers again, singing our traditional camp songs and reenacting camp skits. It was an amazing and heartwarming event. We're currently making plans for next year's 20-year celebration and now official EAS reunion. Just a question though, how many of us tonight here ever attended a middle school reunion? John Hamilton will now discuss value.
Our students are actively engaged in project-based authentic learning with real-world connections in all classes. These activities involve research, collaboration, and meaningful work products, some of which you can see in the room tonight. These projects frequently involve peer editing and self and peer evaluation. The projects are often related to local or regional history and environments. Our students have learning experiences outside the classroom as well. We conduct 3 week-long excursions which build our school community. Students, parents, and teachers work together in a camp-like setting to learn, experience the wonder of nature, and depend on each other to accomplish tasks such as cooking the evening meal. Student ownership is further elevated, and relationships between teachers, parents, and students is further deepened when smaller groups set out on our April excursions. These excursions are led by EAS staff members. These trips have included exploring state and national parks around our country, biking in the San Juan Islands, hiking on the Washington coast, visiting the volcanoes of Hawaii, the Everglades in Florida, the canyons in Arizona and Utah, the deserts of California, the glaciers of Alaska, floating the Mississippi River, and walking the streets of nearby Seattle. Students participate in the planning and execution of our trips while applying classroom learning and performing service learning in these venues. Now I'd like to introduce the Bear Clan member, Austin Pazinich, who's a 7th grader, who will share some reflections on excursion learning.
During the second week of school, we go to Camp Hamilton. The leap between elementary and middle school can be scary, and Camp Hamilton builds a bridge to assure a smooth transition. When I arrived at EAS as a new 6th grader, I only knew 4 kids from my elementary. At camp, the 8th graders show the new 6th graders around and lead them from place to place. I learned to rely on and trust my group members for activities like sailing, orienteering, and high ropes. This year, as a 7th grader, I helped direct the wide-eyed 6th graders around camp. Overall, Camp Hamilton is a great way to transition from elementary to middle school. It enabled me to make new friends and strengthen friendships with existing classmates.
I'd like to introduce Marie-Jo Andrada.
When our units are integrated across subjects, systemic connections become readily apparent and students transition to global thinking. Our students also have many opportunities to apply their classroom learnings to their field experiences on excursions and during service learning on our community stewardship projects. Additionally, EAS students take 3 years of Spanish classes. Their language experiences are shared across the school community, which reinforces the learning and increases their overall language proficiency. There is extensive writing across the curriculum, and we integrate different forms of writing across all subject areas, not just in language arts. Our teaching team incorporates this instruction and assessment into our professional growth and evaluation efforts. We also infuse writing into our excursions and service learning via field journaling. Students maintain both an excursion journal and a field journal for their 3 years at EAS. These journals are often treasured by the students long after they leave our school. So basically, our students are writing all the time. Our school has employed a standards-based assessment since 2001. Students are expected to be at or above standard. The 4-point grading system, with 3 being at standard, communicates student performance based on national, state, and district standards. Student grades are not based on the percentage of points earned, but on demonstration of proficiency on clearly defined learning objectives. Student work products are assessed with leveled rubrics, which clearly identify if a student has met or exceeded the standard. If the work does not meet standard, such assessment also clearly shows students and parents what components may be lacking. This allows students to target these and demonstrate proficiency on the next assessment. We hold our students accountable for making consistent progress to being at standard in order to earn expedition participation. Now I'd like to introduce Evelyn Smith, a 7th grade member of the Orca Clan, to share a student's perspective on academic challenge.
At EAS, the curriculum is challenging and fast-paced. In 6th grade, I really appreciated the opportunity of being in a math level that added on to my existing knowledge. Having already been in advanced math prior to middle school, I wasn't looking forward to relearning topics. EAS allowed me to test into a math class that built on my past skills. Some subjects can be difficult, but the teachers are there to help you grow as a student. They know our potential and push us to reach that point. Everything taught is meaningful. At the end of these 3 years, we're prepared for new challenges because now we know how to handle them. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. And I'd like to just remark that the students wrote their own scripts, and they wrote those this weekend. The teachers were a little behind. In summary, the EAS school community intentionally provides students with connection, value, and challenge in a variety of ways. This leads to successful learning, students who have confidence in their ability to play a meaningful role in their community, and learners who embrace appropriate challenge and rise to meet it. It's easy for us to talk about this. We want to invite members of the board and district leadership to visit our school at any time. Our students have personal invitations to present to you tonight that also identify the specific dates of some of our upcoming school events.
Thank you, sir.
We want to convey our sincere appreciation to the board members and to our district's leadership team for their support not only of EAS, but also the district's Choice Schools program. At EAS, we have a tradition of expressing appreciation or recognition with a cheer that, in Coast Salish, loosely translates to good, good, very good.
1, 2, 3.
Say hey, say hey, Lee. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. The kids are always the highlight of one of these evenings. And speaking as a science nerd of a very high order, I do appreciate the value of this particular choice school. There's just one thing I want to gently correct that I heard earlier this evening. Our staff know this, but our parents keep cycling through the schools, and you have to teach each new set of parents the same thing. We can't actually require 30 hours of community service from the parents. You're allowed to strongly recommend it, but when you say you require it, it gives an impression that parents who are working 2 jobs and et cetera don't have the time for their kids, therefore their kids can't apply. If someone applies and can't fit that 30 hours, their kid can still go to that school. This is a very important message to the other, and it's not unique to EAS. Every one of the choice schools, I hear this.
Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Carlson. And we work hard to work with our parents and families. There's lots of in-kind and things. Yeah. But very good point. Thank you.
Anyway, but once again, I'm highly supportive of this program, and hey, I'm jealous. It looks like a lot of fun, which is a good thing for school to be.
Yeah, I also just want to say thank you all for being here and doing such a great job with the presentation. Thank you to Victor, thank you to the staff, thank you to the parents and students. It was a great presentation, and we appreciate the invitations as well, so thanks.
All right, well, thank you so much. Now we're on to the public comment section. On a monthly basis, the Board of Directors invites the community to provide public input. Yeah. I was going to let the kids see, because we only got one person signed up, I was going to let them see 3 minutes worth of public comment as a public education. On the other hand, if they want to go to home and do their homework, they are allowed to do their homework. So, anyway, oh yeah, go get the snacks. Hit the snacks, that's good. Keep your sugar levels up. So on a monthly basis, we do provide a public comment period. This is not a conversation, this is more for us to hear from you. It's not the only way you can contact us. There are many ways, email, don't try to phone us because I'm not sure how to check my voice box. But email is a great way to get in touch with us. And we're also always open for individual meetings if there's something that's really an issue for you for an actual conversation. But this is our business meeting, and as such, each individual, when your name is called, will approach the central podium. You have 3 minutes. There's this lovely little stoplight over there. When the stoplight is green, is go. Just tell us who you are, what your area of, which school your kids are at, or if you don't know, then just say don't know. Hopefully you do know if you've got kids in our schools. But when it turns yellow, you've got 1 minute left. When it turns red, it'll beep. At that point, we'd appreciate it if you could wrap it up. And that's pretty much it. There are only 2 really important rules. We don't take, well, actually, there's only 1 really important rule left. And that is we don't take public comment by name about staff in this. This is a broadcast thing, and it's not appropriate for us to discuss staff members by name, unless, of course, we're saying there's the most awesome thing you've ever seen. So with that, I have 1 person signed up, Ann Young from Juanita Zone. Come on up. The microphone, I can never see the light on it. Is the microphone lit? Okay, it's hot. Yeah, right at the podium. Go for it.
Hello, my name is Ann Young, and our son Dexter is a kindergartner at Juanita Elementary. I'm a former public elementary school teacher, and I'm here to demand that you heed the state and federal government's recommendation for 90 minutes of purposeful play each day in the kindergarten classroom and facilitate professional development so that teachers can use it effectively. OSPI released an incredible document called the Full Day Kindergarten Guide, and here's a quote from the document. Play and academics are not an either or. For children birth to 8, play is an essential element of learning. This 70-page document has the last 5 pages are references to the research upon which it was founded, and it uses the word play 89 times. Case studies refer to the decline in play causing a rise in mental illnesses like depression and anxiety. Other districts have mandated play in their kindergarten classrooms. Recess does not count in this 90 minutes. The document defines purposeful play. Here's a quote. Sorry. The process of plan, do, reflect allows children to submit the skills and extend them by making meaningful connections to their own life. When a student is in charge of his or her own learning, the highest level of engagement is achieved. RCW 28A states that in order for schools to receive funding for full-day kindergarten, they must offer 14 individual subjects and skills to be learned in a hands-on environment. Our son currently gets 25 minutes of plan to reflect in his kindergarten class, and he often self-selects the activity of making paper airplanes. He is incorporating geometry, communication skills, social emotional skills, physics, art, PE, fine motor skills, gross motor skills when he throws the paper airplane. And he's incorporating all but 5 of the requirements during this time. It wouldn't be that hard for a teacher to hit the other 5 during the rest of the school day. The plan to reflect pedagogy is scientifically proven to return $6 to society for every $1 spent on the program. And your board's legislative platform is asking the state for funding on several crucial initiatives. It's important that we reciprocate by listening to the state when they're offering us a program that saves them money. Dexter's teacher would call this a win-win. I spoke on the phone to Mary Waldron at Puget Sound ESD, and she says that she offers 3 days of professional development to all kindergarten teachers about the plan to reflect pedagogy. And she admits that that's not enough, and she's willing to work with you. Our family is choosing to keep Dexter out of school 1 day a week to make up for the learning that is being taken away from him by the district. But for kids who are less privileged, the urgent need for change is even more extreme. Do we want to close the achievement gap? Our children's future requires that we believe in science, that we put aside what people might think of us, and that we answer to our own integrity. Your board's legislative platform says that our schools can provide an innovative learning environment. To quote Fred Rogers, he says, for children, play is serious learning. And it is really the work of childhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The other thing, if you've never presented before, always send it to us by email after. That helps us remember what's been said. So no, don't worry, just send it out by email. With that, is there anybody else who did not sign up and was hoping to speak? Please. Hi, Corky.
Good evening.
Long time no see.
President Carlson, Superintendent Pierce, directors, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My wife and I have no longer any students in the Lake Washington School District. Both have gone on to greater and other things, and my son Hunter just got a 5-year scholarship to Alabama, Roll Tide, and his experience and Jeffrey's experience was exceptional in the Lake Washington School District. And I want to applaud the board and the school district for putting forth a bond and 2 levies this February, so we can increase the building composition, the infrastructure of the district to take care of the almost 30,000 students that now go to school in the Lake Washington School District. And watching the EAS students, congratulations for all your achievements. It is that kind of diversity in the Lake Washington School District that our bonds and levies fund. So we as voters, now I'm talking to the 100,000 voters in the Lake Washington School District, we have the opportunity to vote yes in February for the bond and 2 levies while reducing the Lake Washington School District portion of your property taxes. Let me say that again. Your property taxes from the Lake Washington School District assessment will go down with a yes vote for next month's bond and 2 levies. I encourage you, as a proud parent and a lifelong student, I started at Redmond Elementary in 1961, and I'm still here loving the opportunity to serve the Lake Washington School District. Please vote yes in February's bond and 2 levies. It's our opportunity to help the 30,000 students scroll through these hallways and not get squished. Thank you.
Marvelous.
The previous comments were not paid for by the school district.
Marvelous though that was, the district is not allowed to, I need to make it very clear to everyone that Mr. Truen is not an employee of the district, and neither was he compensated or influenced to make said statement. But nonetheless, one should get out there and vote in February. So that concludes our public comment period. Please, if you have someone who needs to do homework, take them home so they can do homework, because from here on out, it just gets more exciting. And if you're teaching tomorrow, you're also. Yeah. All right. So our next item on the agenda, let's see, have I?
Donations.
Yes, next, well, actually, next we're supposed to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified.
As modified.
Yeah.
Sure. So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Liberty, seconded by Director Sage. Dr. Pierce, will you please poll the board?
Cassandra?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Siri?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Pierce, will you please review the donations for us?
Yes, I am happy to. If you turn to tab 5, you will see that we have a number of very generous donations this evening. All total, the donations are $600, rounding up to the nearest dollar. So we have a $1,280 donation from Lake Washington Schools Foundation to Sandberg Elementary to support robotics, $26,280 from Elizabeth Blackwell PTSA to Blackwell Elementary to support the building leadership team, to purchase library books and classroom supplies, to support classroom enrichment and assemblies. $29,560 from Rachel Carson, PTSA to Carson Elementary, to provide stipends for webmaster, watchdogs, outdoor ed, intramurals, student council, choir, and honor society, to purchase library books and to support classroom enrichment. $1,575 from Albert Einstein, PTSA to Einstein Elementary, to purchase a site license for IXL Math. $6,028 from Ben Franklin PTA to Franklin Elementary to purchase library laptops. $23,279 from Helen Keller PTSA to Keller Elementary to provide stipends for outdoor ed and Lego Club, to purchase library books, musical instrument, classroom supplies, office supplies, field day supplies, and to support classroom enrichment and staff development. $1,512 from Horace Mann Elementary PTA to Mann to purchase musical instruments. $2,000 from Symetra to Smith Elementary to purchase classroom supplies. $4,433 from Laura Ingalls Wilder Elementary PTSA to Wilder Elementary to purchase Dreambox Math and support academic enrichment. $2,804 from Juanita Rebels Booster to Kamaikan ASB to purchase musical instruments. And finally, $21,850 from International Community School PTSA to ICS to purchase art supplies and to support graduation. So again, all total this evening, $120,600 in very generous donations from a variety of sources.
Wow. As always, we really do want to thank the individuals and groups who've chosen to support our students and schools. We greatly appreciate their generosity. So the next item on the non-consent agenda was the approval of the monitoring report for science, and I'm going to swap that in for one we're pulling from the consent agenda, simply because I apologize to you, my colleagues, but I literally have had a fire that started before the holidays, and I have not been able to devote the time to do this right. So I will bring that to you hopefully at least a week before our next meeting. But in the interest of that, getting back to the item that we're pulling off of the consent agenda, the district has some standard procedures for regularly updating salary schedules for each group of district employees, whether that's certificated staff, classified staff, or administrators. We've recently been through such a process for our administrators, building principals, and central office administrators. And normally the results of this process would be in the consent agenda. That is, we wouldn't talk about it while we're broadcasting, we wouldn't talk about it publicly. But we have a special circumstance this time, and that's simply that the pending bond and levy initiatives on the February ballot. So in the interest of transparency, not because we think that there's anything that has gone sideways with the protocol for how the process was attacked, we thought it would be prudent to discuss the process and results. So with that, Dr. Pierce, do you briefly want to talk about the process?
Sure, I'm happy to do that, yeah. So as Chris mentioned, of course, as an organization with many employees and different employee groups, we have each employee group that either has a handbook or a collective bargaining agreement. And those handbooks or collective bargaining agreements are reviewed on a cycle, an established cycle. And so, for example, last year, you will recall that we went through the negotiation process with our Teachers Association for LWEA, and that resulted in a new 4-year contract with our certificated staff, our teachers. And as part of that process, we are updating the collective bargaining agreement and updating salary schedules. One of our strategic goals is to recruit, hire, and retain highly effective personnel. And so, of course, we want to make sure that our salaries are competitive with districts with whom we compete for talent in all areas. So this year, 2 groups are up for review, and that's our district leadership team, our administrators. That includes our building principals and associate principals, our department administrators, and our central leadership team. In addition, our Prof Tech staff, we started that process, but they're the other group that's up for review. Review will be beginning shortly. So those are the 2 groups. And then, of course, next year there'll be more groups, and so every group's on a rotation. So this happens to be the rotation year for district leadership team and Prof Tech. And I want to make sure that it's well understood, this really has absolutely nothing to do with our bond and levy, in that this is our regular review time for this, so it's really not connected in any way in terms of, so our bond, we have a bond and levy year, as you mentioned, but that's really not, yeah, it's really, I mean, in that way has nothing to do with this. So I want to make sure it doesn't somehow get, convoluted together or connected together. So whether we were having a bond and levy this year or not, last time we reviewed our district leadership team handbook was in 2013-14. So we had it established for 4 years, and now it's 2017-18, and that's the year that we're reviewing it, and so that work's been complete, as the board knows, and we have adjusted salary schedules to ensure that we remain competitive, and we have a methodology for doing that that compares our compensation to 11 other districts. And those are districts, as I mentioned, that are neighboring districts with whom we compete. And so the salary schedules have been updated accordingly, and that's what is coming before the board for action this evening. All part of our regular, normal process of how we do business as a district and as an organization.
Thank you. So any further questions?
Yeah,
Yes, go ahead.
Are we at discussion point?
Well, I think
Are we
we're
waiting for
do we need
questions?
to have a motion to approve, and then, motion to approve second, and then we discuss?
Right, so I should just be
Robert
clear
rules. I've almost got
that,
it.
just on that. So I'm bringing forward a recommendation. The recommendation is for the board to approve the salary schedules that have been presented.
Right.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Liberty, seconded by Director Bleasner.
I can discuss now?
Yes.
Okay. One of the reasons I asked and moved that we move this to the non-consent agenda was because I think it's really important for the public to know how far behind we were in the pay in which we give administrators, especially our principals on the ground. When we were looking through the figures, and thank you, Dr. Pierce, for getting all of that information. It was really voluminous, and I appreciate the work that you went through to get that. But when I looked through the information and realized we're behind Everett and Highline as far as what we are paying our, sorry, am I back?
Yeah,
Our building administrators, that to me said there is something that we need to change because we live in an area that's more expensive, the cost of living here is higher. And I just wanted to make that really clear so that the public understands why it's so important for us to approve this.
And just to add on to what you were saying, it wasn't, I mentioned that we have 11 districts that we compare to. We were dead last amongst all the districts. So it's not just that we were not as high as the two that you mentioned, but we were dead last amongst the
Not our finest
comparable districts.
And however much parents might butt heads with their local principal, as long as you can still work with your local principal without always getting what you want, that principal's doing their job and doing it reasonably well. So our principals are very, on average, very talented. Every one of us will always have that one principal who's just driving us nuts, but that's just what parenting is.
Well, do you always agree with your spouse?
Exactly. So with that, the fear when you're behind by a significant fraction of the neighboring districts, a high school principalship is a high school principalship. There is a very real risk that we were going to lose building administrators because we were no longer competitive with the local salaries. Anyway, so this is something that we were concerned about. Mark?
Yeah. Okay, we're 12. To bring people up to 6th, yeah, I assume that's where we're going for the middle?
No, actually, as what the methodology that is included in the handbook and the methodology that we typically apply, and it has a historical context, so I should get into that. We've always sort of tried to be number 3. And I know that sounds odd when you're trying to compete with neighboring districts, but that number 3 has history behind it in that it is connected to the old differences between what districts could collect in funding. So we had districts who were grandfathered and able to collect more funding. So they actually had more funds available to pay their people. So they have historically paid people more. Essentially a good example. So when it comes to administrators, what the methodology that has been shared with the board and that's included in the handbook is to take the top 4 districts amongst the comparable districts and do the mean. So we essentially get to that third. So we're not trying to be the high, we're not trying to pay people the very most. Our goal is to be competitive. And so the methodology results in us being in the top 4.
how much of a percentage increase are we talking about for the various levels? I mean, we're talking about people earning six-figure salaries. I think we're talking about, if we're going from 12th to 3rd, I have a great concern with the public perception of our responsibility with their dollars. And I understand that we're trying to be competitive. I could also understand the desire perhaps to make this more of an incremental raise as opposed to a one-time, whoa, shot.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. I think it's all about market, the market conditions. So if you're Google and you're competing with Microsoft for tech talent, you look at what's Microsoft paying, so you can pay people comparably. And so the salaries that people earn are the market, what the market demands. We're in line in terms of, with the exception of falling behind, of what is the normal going rate for what it takes to do these very complex, challenging, difficult jobs.
And that's actually something where our elementary building, your principal's managing an average of 25?
At least. I mean, we could get into the number of direct reports and what the number of students people are responsible for in addition to the staff.
That scale of responsibility in the private sector is compensated
It's not even
ridiculously.
comparable.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not a way to compare
So we're
to
not
what a
competitive
program
with
manager
that.
at Microsoft
Right.
does in terms of maybe having 3 direct reports and what a building administrator does, for example. The other piece of that is, the incremental part. So many other districts adjust salaries on a more frequent basis, and that prevents you from falling far behind and then having to make a more significant adjustment to catch up. So that's one of the things that we're looking at is it's not our goal to be 12th, to be dead last, to pay the worst of what
Penny wise, pound foolish.
is made. And so reviewing those salaries on a more frequent basis and making more incremental adjustments makes sense moving forward. The issue today is that the adjustment needs to be made to get people up to, market value.
I understand that. My concern is the idea that we could easily make a case for the fact that as we do this one, it could actually, if we divide it into quarters, and you get them up to where you want them to be, I have a hard time with when we have paras and teachers and IAs, janitors, who are struggling to meet and can't live within 30 to 40 miles of our district. And we're talking about, now granted, this is just a handful of administrators, and I realize that, and I'm not begrudging anybody a salary they earn, and they all work hard. But I also have a problem with the disparity between the teaching staff and the administrators, as well as the paras, janitors, whoever.
I think it's important to note, if I can comment here, that the same methodology is applied for every group. So when we review our teacher compensation, we look at what is the comparable teacher pay. So you have to compare apples to apples. You have to compare that same market, just like in the the private sector. You might compare what does a program manager for technology make at Google compared to a program manager at Microsoft. You wouldn't compare what does an administrative professional make compared to a program manager. So it's very, that's the logical comparability. You're comparing people with like jobs, like responsibilities, like duties, and making those adjustments so we're competitive with neighboring districts. We don't compare between job categories.
And Mark,
It's all driven by market, what the going rate is for jobs and for all employee groups. As you know, as we've done this, over the course of many years with all of our groups, it's always about being competitive, paying people at the rate where we can compete, and ensuring that we have salaries that recruit, hire, and retain highly effective personnel in every single category of employee.
I understand
Yeah,
that, but most of the contracts we're talking about are 5 to 8% at the most, probably mostly 5% increments, and this doesn't
Mark,
look like a 5% at all. I'm sorry.
I appreciate that, but I don't think there's much we can do about what the market is going to bear. It's where we're at. Siri?
I appreciate the process that is in place and that's clear and documented as to how it goes through and it's applied equally across those groups. That's the piece that's held and it makes sense. And in doing so, this was the recommended increase that should be given. I would support that. I think that's the right move. I think it's what we've agreed to is sort of what is the policy of how we go forward. If there's further discussion on that concept at a different time, I think that makes sense, but this is currently the policy in place and the process that's there. As Director Sage mentioned, these are positions that do require a lot of skill and a lot of work. It is important that we pay market rate. The conversation of living wage is a huge conversation, and I don't believe is something to hold this evening. So I would recommend that I will support the recommendation going forward.
I hear you on that. Eric, do you want to weigh in? No. And broadly speaking, there's always a challenge for, as each of us moves forward, looking at what they're paying kids out of college these days. Good grief. I remember back when my wife and I could get dinner for $3.23. Back when Costco slice of pizza and the Coke was 2 of them for $3.23. But the world moves forward and we're starting to see some inflation around here. And the fact is, that's what our principles are at. I don't think we're likely to change opinions. My goal in this conversation was to have the open discussion of it, lest anyone think that we're trying to slip one past. This is not something that's out of the ordinary. It's been done the same way we've been doing these things ever since I've been on the board. And yeah, we're behind by a lot on a particular category of our staff. It looks like a bigger percent increase, but at the same time, it's a bigger percent behind than I've ever seen. So that's just where we're at. So with that, I'm going to take President's prerogative and take us to a vote.
Do we need to pull the board? Or
Do we need to?
What, or is it just all those in favor? Sure.
Yeah. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Thank you. Okay. So let's see, we're done with the board science monitoring. Motion carries. Yep, right. So now we're on to program reports, I believe.
All right, wonderful. We have 2 program reports tonight, one for social studies and one for our continuous improvement process. So we might just need a moment here to get the presentation pulled up. Mike Van Orden, our Associate Superintendent for Student Academic Success Services, is going to help with the social studies presentation. Follows the format that we typically follow with program presentations. So we'll let Mike just get that brought up and then we'll get started.
Just logging out of the old one here.
I don't see why not.
As long as you're clean.
I could use one too. I guess.
Just make sure I pass. Okay. I know, we just need one.
Okay, I think we're ready.
It's showing up there. It's not showing on our screens yet. Here it is. Wonderful. Okay, so as we typically do, we have a program report that this particular area is not the same as our other academic areas like literacy, math, and science. We don't have a full ER report for social studies because there aren't state assessments that are in social studies like there are with literacy, science, and math. But in the program presentation, we do want to take this opportunity to highlight our social studies program, and so this will give you some ends information and connect it with our academic program specific to social studies. So those interdisciplinary skills and attributes that you see connected to ER3, these are definitely skills that students are learning in social studies, along with the social studies content and standards. So with that, you've seen these slides before in general, how the ends and means connect. But with that, I will hand it over to Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity to speak to our social studies program tonight. As Dr. Priest mentioned, this is an area where we don't collect data, and at the same time, we do have some information to share with you about how we deliver social studies in our district. Starting with, as always, when we're talking about programs, with our standards. And in social studies, there are 5 major strands, or what we call essential academic learning requirements in the area of civics, economics, geography, history, and social studies skills. And so we'd like to give you just a quick overview of what you might see in terms of what students would be learning in each of those areas. So for example, civics, very relevant to our world today, even in terms of our meeting tonight about government, law, politics, looking at economics and geography, history, social studies, all throughout K-12. Students are getting really rich, wonderful experiences in these areas, and we know that those are tremendously valuable and important for our kids to be future ready, to go out and be members of our communities and members of our citizenry. More specifically, though, let's look at what kids are actually learning in those areas. So, for example, in civics, this is one what we call grade level expectation kind of topic area and it breaks down by grade, so you can see how it progresses. So, for example, in 3rd grade, students are taking the ideas or ideals that are in our documents and in our laws about unity and diversity in community, and then by 8th grade, they start to evaluate efforts to reduce discrepancies, and those are things that we're seeing in our world today. And then by the 12th grade, they're looking at relationships between key ideals and historic and current reality, so bridging that history and current events and making connections and actually looking for solutions. In economics, that idea of cost and benefit, which again, we just had a conversation about tonight, and then looking at how do you analyze that and think about the groups who are involved and think about people's incentives. And so they not only look at it from current events, but historical, and think about choices that people make. And really, what a wonderful opportunity for kids to be part and be thinking about the world that they're going to be going out and living in, and in fact, many of whom are actually participating in. In geography, and again, this is a skill that sometimes we don't think about, but the world, knowing the place in the world and our place within it is an important part of being members of not only local communities, but global communities. And so we asked our students to develop their understanding, their geographical awareness, starting in 4th grade, thinking about place and the movement of people, looking at changes over time geographically, and then looking at the tools that we use for geography and using them to better understand our world. In history, again, we have very specific periods that students study at different grade levels, and so they're looking at what they can learn from history. And then also, even though sometimes these are historical studies, they are often having conversations in their classes about connections to the world today. So even though they might study U.S. history from 1776 to 1900, there'll be lots of conversation about how does this relate to what we see in our world and the lives you're leading, and making those connections, because that's important. That historical context makes a big difference in the lives of our kids. And then those important skills, and we talked a little bit about these at the beginning, the idea of thinking skills and evaluation skills and understanding history and making inquiry and learning about history is really embedded with all of these skills. And so these are important things we want our kids to learn, and that they cut across content areas. They're not only used in social studies, but in other content areas are used in kids' lives, and so they serve them well, not only in school, but as they exit school. So those are some examples of the what and the things students are learning. The context in which they learn those, we have some information on for elementary, middle, and high school. So at the elementary level, our students get social studies instruction in every grade level, K through 5. That ranges from about 2 hours to 3 hours per week, and that there's a progression in each grade level, starting in kindergarten, learning about community, and then it starts to become a little more traditional as students get older, with curriculum that, again, is designed to work together. So we have curriculum that Social Studies Alive that cuts across K3 and 5th grade. We do Washington State history in 4th, and so that's a standalone. And then we also have these story paths that are really these rich, wonderful experiences that kids actually kind of go through a simulation and learning, experiential learning. We mentioned the standards that we use, and those are powerful and wonderful tools. And we're looking forward, and 2021 seems like a ways out, but it's not that far out. We're coming up on some social studies adoptions and some really great opportunities to update what our kids are learning. In middle school, we have social studies in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, so 50 minutes a day each day. And you can see the progression there. So there's a general social studies class in 6th grade, and then U.S. history and Washington State history in 8th. Interestingly enough, Washington State history in 8th grade is a graduation requirement, though it's not a credit-bearing requirement. It's just assigned, they have to have completed it. Good core materials, though, we will be looking at those following our elementary adoption, and we're looking at that in 2023. And then finally, high school. In high school, there is a 3-credit social studies requirement, so a credit of contemporary world problems, and then U.S. history, and then there's a combination of civics and social studies elective. In some cases, those civics courses or that civics requirement is met through, for example, AP courses, so it's embedded in our courses, and that gives kids an opportunity to take additional social studies electives, which I'll show you in a few moments. And then, again, when those courses are taken are pretty much the same in each school, though they vary a little bit. So, for example, Lake Washington starts social studies in 10th grade. East Lake, where they combine social studies and English together, they have a slightly different program, but that content, the standards in those courses are the same in each school, just the delivery varies slightly. And then for them, we're also looking at a 2023 secondary adoption update. So I mentioned electives, and one of the things that I think is really important to point out at this point in time as we're looking at a 7-period schedule is you can see up there some really rich, wonderful electives that when kids have a 6-period day, they might not have as many options to choose, or they may not choose just because there aren't as many slots in the day. But as you look at some of those electives up there and think about the options that kids will have to start taking these, we really see some value and some opportunity here. So, you know, I think one of the questions comes up sometimes is, well, are you adding more to the mix? Well, we already in our social studies area have some really rich, wonderful courses that we think kids will be able to take more advantage of. And so at least for next year, we're anticipating in many of these areas potentially some more enrollment, and particularly in years where we might not be able to have a course that would run just because of low enrollment, we anticipate that there might be some higher enrollment in next year. And so I think there's just some really wonderful things up there that you can see. So as we mentioned, we don't have state assessments for social studies. However, we do have some data that we do look at. We have social studies AP courses, and so we do collect AP data, and we think that's a good thing to look at periodically. And so we have our 2017 data that we just added. So starting with AP courses, we looked at our 2014 to 2017 trends and patterns. These are for the courses where we have courses offered in our schools or where kids are taking AP exams. And you'll also see up there we have I think this was one, I'm sorry, there's AP art history that can get a social studies elective. You'll see on the next slide. There were 4 students that took that, so that's not reflected up there. But you can see our students perform over time pretty consistently. Anywhere from 58, 60% all the way up to 97, 94, 97% passage on different exams. And as you know, we've talked about, I think in prior program reports, AP exams vary in terms of student passage rates. And so in our next slide, you'll get to see some of the comparisons between state and national scores. We're on par for in most cases, or well above in other areas, particularly in the areas where we have many of our students taking AP courses. And then in other areas, we have slightly fewer kids taking, which gives you a little bit more variation in those scores. And as I mentioned earlier, I think there's some potential for some of those courses maybe to be taken more frequently because there are more options in the day. So that might change a little bit the scores that we see next year. But as I mentioned before, pretty much on par or better than state and national scores. And this is very much when we talked about looking at data in the past, this compares like kids across the country, so kids who are taking AP. And one of the things I think that's important to point out to wrap up here is we have a very high AP participation rate and a high AP passage rate. We were just put on the AP honor roll. That's not the case in all districts. In some districts, there are students that are very much kind of hand-selected. We have a very high rate of students taking AP. So that's also a testament to the scores you're seeing up there. So that was a very brief overview of our social studies program. And we can maybe
Can I
take
ask
few
a quick
questions.
question? I might have missed. Is a passing grade 3 or higher? Okay.
Correct.
Mike, can you give me some examples of the AP classes that civics are embedded in? I've got some wild guesses on my part, but can you give me some examples of some of the AP classes that the civics requirements
Oh,
are
yeah,
embedded
it's
in?
AP US Government and I think it's,
And politics.
yeah,
Politics?
in fact, actually,
Yeah.
I have it right here. Yes, so it's AP US Government and US Government are two courses that we have embedded civics credit. And that's because there is actually civics content in those
No,
courses.
I understand.
Yeah.
I was just curious to see how broad we.
And I'm sorry, there's
spread
one
out.
other that's offered at ICS. It's an AP Comparative Government.
Okay, okay. Also, I remember a few years back, we had a little bump in the road with some parts of our community that in the world of religions. Have we addressed the issue that of how many religions we are including in that course study this time?
Yeah, we did a program update on that, I think it was last year or the year before. Starting in 6th grade is when religions are introduced, and starting in, I think there was a question about Islam at the time, that starts in 7th grade. So I think there was a question, were they there? And when we did a review, we actually did find that there was a coverage of religions, and that they're treated fairly objectively. Again, starting primarily in 6th grade is where we see more of a survey. And then in also in 9th and 10th grade, there's a pretty broad survey of the major religions in the world.
So Islam is included these
Yes.
days? Great,
Yeah.
great, because I know that was a point of contention with a lot of our community, and I really appreciate you including that.
You stole my question.
Well, I have one
Go
to make
for
up for it. I am guessing that which AP courses are offered at which high school depend on the teacher's availability to teach that subject.
So we actually did quite a review of our AP offerings by high school a couple of years ago to ensure that there was parity amongst those, and that's included in our EL7. And so that'll be coming up because what we want to ensure is that it's really not dependent on there's a baseline offerings of consistent offerings across schools, and then we're helping principals to find teachers needed to teach the AP courses. So there's some variation between schools, but they all have a consistent set of AP offerings now. It wasn't always the case that are being taught at each school, and then some variation. And so we'll provide an update with the specifics as part of EL7 coming up.
Yeah, and specifically, I think you can see up there, world history, AP World, AP US, politics, US government and politics, psychology, just by the enrollment. You can see it's one of those that are offered
I
in
want
each
to
school.
take the economics, that's why I'm asking. One more question. Do teachers have to go through a training in order to teach AP? And do we pay for that training, or is that something that they're taking upon themselves?
They do have to complete a training. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah,
Or
and Matt, maybe
potentially,
too,
Matt,
there's-
because it's really part of accelerated
Yeah,
programs,
so
or we can do
teachers
a
that have been teaching
follow-up.
for a while, there are AP summer institutes that are provided to keep them up to speed. And then typically when a new teacher is coming into AP, they're sent to that AP summer institute prior to teaching the course. Is that correct, Matt? Anything to
And
maybe
I
add
don't
to it?
believe it's an individual teacher
No,
expense
no,
incurred.
no.
It's something, because we want to encourage
Right.
people to get the right training. So what we'll do is we'll follow up and provide an update on that, just so we ensure we're providing specific, accurate info.
Great, thank you.
And much as I'd love to see AP European history everywhere, I second the AP Econ as a baseline. So, any other questions on this topic? Nope. Okay.
The only one thing I would ask, thinking of some of the meetings that we held, there was some discussion about civic education and that concern, and actually some discussion at the legislature around that. It would be interesting to just have a quick summary outline of what we are doing. You kind of highlighted that in the grades, but sort of what those are, of what our district is currently doing in civics education, as we can provide that to the legislature, just to be able to say, here's what is happening, so as a good informational concept.
Yeah, we can do that. And then also, I didn't mention, we do curriculum-based assessments. They're now called OSPI-developed assessments in grades 5, 7, and 12 that are civics assessments. And so we don't collect data on those, but there's content that goes with them that we could provide information about.
And I guess the interest would be the content. Actually,
Correct.
I wouldn't be so concerned about the assessment
Right,
piece
right.
of it at this point.
Yeah,
Thanks.
to echo what Sherry's saying, given the fact that there's a push in the legislature to couple driver's licenses with voter registration, I think it behooves us to really step up our component of civics, given our low voter turnout.
Fair point. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
Which brings us back to the agenda and Soup's report.
Well, we have one more program report there for continuous
Continuous improvement,
improvement
right.
process.
Let's do
So
that.
this is the time of year coming up where the board will receive building continuous improvement process or SIP plans. So this is the time of year where we just do a brief overview of our continuous improvement process prior to the SIP plans going to the board. So that's what this program report focused on, and John's just about to pull it up. So this is about our continuous improvement process. You can go to the next slide, and actually I'm going to have you go one ahead. They've seen this before. But I think, you know, just like the board has a monitoring process for looking at student results, and then you know, we analyze those results and present that, and the board does now the new process with the assertions and priority setting, and then that informs our next steps as a district in terms of what strategies we need to step up, or what new things we need to do, or what we need to continue that's working, and so forth. That's a very similar process to what happens at the building level when it comes to buildings developing their SIP plans. So if you think about it, there's really three interrelated monitoring and improvement processes that begins really with that board monitoring process of end results and executive limitations that then informs our district level continuous improvement processes around strategic planning and program evaluation, system evaluation, and what we're implementing. And then, of course, that's connected to the building level continuous improvement process. So there's this sort of a bottom-up, top-down interdependent process. So I just think it's important to highlight that, because it's not like the building SIP is over here and somehow not at all connected to all the work that we're doing around end results monitoring. And in fact, some of the improvements that the board has put into place with the new monitoring processes is helping us to really strengthen the connections between these two other monitoring and continuous improvement processes. And just for everybody's clarity's sake, I just want to explain real quick what those acronyms are on the previous slide. So we all know SIP is the acronym for Continuous Improvement Process. So when we talk about SIP plans, it's the Continuous Improvement Process Plan. Because with professional growth and evaluation, or PGE, those processes both for teachers and principals, and our professional community and collaboration processes that all involve teacher-to-teacher collaboration, goal setting for students, that helps to inform the building level SIP process. So there's another level of kind of nesting that happens within each building. So it's not just that the principal sits down and looks at the data and sets some goals, and it's a process that involves staff, and then teachers are looking at their own student level data, right? And they're setting goals as part of their professional growth and evaluation processes. So this is a very nested process, and I think that's just important to highlight. So with that, really, you think about all of these processes at every level and in every way involve evaluating outcomes, analyzing data, it's all student-focused, how are our students performing, and determining based on that data, where do we need to focus? What are our priority areas? What are our strengths and weaknesses? Where are we progressing appropriately? Where are those areas of exception? So that's what the board is doing, right? Then we take that as a district team and we set goals in terms of what program adjustments we need to make or so forth. So remember, the means are really the superintendent staff role and the board setting priority and focus, and then we're doing the work to implement changes to our programs and so forth, implementing that plan, and then again, we're looking at that data to see the strategies that we're employing making a difference in improving outcomes for students, and this is a continuous process at every level in the organization. So with that, tonight, the focus is really the building level process, and that's what John's going to highlight a little more. Our directors school support work very closely with our building administrators on the whole SIP planning process. So with that, John, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. And so tonight, we are going to go through the requirements because our schools are required by policy and law to implement school improvement plans. We're going to talk a little bit about process, the components, and then want to finish with talking about the parent and family engagement around this process. And so it seems like everyone has a say in the requirement here. And so I just want to briefly remind us, state regulations do require that schools have a school improvement plan. Board governance policy, EL7, references in item 3 that schools are to develop and implement a process for continuous improvement. In ER1, it references in item 7 to monitor and assure that each school's continuous improvement plan supports the accomplishment of the performance targets. Every school improvement plan actually has the district performance targets identified, and it's relational. They show their school progress and they have the district targets there as well, so that there is an association with what we're saying as a district down to the school level as well. We also have administrative policy that also requires the school improvement plan is put into place, and this just goes into all of the details around what needs to be in that plan. Our central leadership evaluation criteria also cites the concept of continuous improvement efforts. This is something that everyone in the organization is held accountable to in the different evaluation systems. Here for central leadership, our principals are held accountable to developing and implementing a school plan. And our teachers, they're the ones that implement with our students the goals that we set at the district level and at the building level. And here are 3 of the criterion that are in our teachers' professional growth and evaluation. You can see at the bottom there's student growth goals. They're required to set student growth goals in criterion 3 for what they call subgroups of students, so students that need additional focus. Criterion 6 for whole groups of students, so like a class of students. And then criterion 8, they're setting student growth goals around the collaboration that their team is doing in looking at student data, developing assessments, implementing those assessments, and then monitoring that data. And so you can see at all levels of the organization, everyone is focused on continuous improvement. And so looking at the process to implement this, Dr. Pierce just showed you this, but this is really the process that we go through when looking at data and determining what are the next steps we need to make for improvement. It's looking at outcomes, analyzing that data, and then going through a cycle to determine what are the next steps. When you think of a cycle, it's also somewhat linear for our schools because this is something they do on an annual basis. So if you think about in August and September, they're evaluating outcomes and analyzing the data, essentially taking their last year's plan and saying, how did we do? what did the data tell us about how our students performed, and were our goals and strategies that we implemented effective. In kind of that October-November timeline, they're looking at our outcomes, looking at our current students and developing goals for that year. And then really November through June, it's about the implementation of those plans, progress monitoring those plans to make sure that they're on track and making adjustments as needed. Our SIPs do have specific components that we ask all of our schools to complete. Part one of our SIP process really is that reflection in the August-September timeline. It's taking a deep dive into the data to understand the outcomes. And then part two is really the implementation of current goals that are set, identifying strategies, implementing those strategies, and learning from that implementation to make adjustments as needed. Each school identifies goals in specific areas. We have academic areas, and then also areas closing achievement gaps. So identifying groups of students that as a school, they want to identify and really work towards making sure that those groups are receiving the instruction, the strategies to make improvement. School effectiveness is about how staff in the school are operating together, focusing on areas such as attendance and discipline. We know those have direct impact on academic outcomes. And then for our secondary schools, really looking at the different areas of college and career readiness. One of the areas we get questions on are in the closing achievement gaps. What are those areas that we're focused on? And you can see there's great parallel here with the areas that you as a board are discussing around the areas of exception, students receiving ELL services, students receiving safety net services, special education, low income, and race and ethnicity. There's some district level strategies, but there's also some school strategies on this slide. We are implementing district and school-based equity efforts, having those conversations, developing equity teams to be able to focus on many of these issues and strategies. Increased time for our professional community and collaboration. Our teaching staff have 12 specific early release Wednesdays specifically for their team collaboration, where they're analyzing data, looking at student work, developing common formative assessments so that that cycle that you saw before can actually be implemented. Providing training such as SIOP, Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. As a district, we are working towards developing a common approach to co-teaching. And then some school strategies, making sure that they do have targeted scheduling to ensure that groups of students are receiving both core instruction and intervention, and increasing communication with parents and families around students that are not having the success that we want them to. We also pulled some goals for just as examples. The first goal is from a high school, and this is an overall goal looking at English language arts and math performance, but I want to look at the strategies. This school is to be able to meet these goals, they're saying we need to ensure rigor is present, we need to ensure that academic intervention is present, and we need to make sure that we're progress monitoring students that are receiving D's or F's in their class to make sure that we then are providing those academic interventions. So it takes all of those strategies to be able to meet the goals that they've identified. One of our middle schools wrote a goal. It's to reduce any F in a course, because we know course failure leads to future course failure as well. And so being able to identify that quickly and remedy that for that student or those students is critical. And you can see the immediate strategies such as weekly data monitoring, having student intervention teams, and enhancing academic support with the counseling team. Those are immediate. And then kind of the extended strategy for this school is looking at what's a program we can put in place that also helps with this, and this school is implementing AVID over the next couple of years. And then one of our elementary schools, really taking a look at groups of students that are struggling in their school and determining strategies to meet those goals, looking at aligned instruction to support struggling students, and also thinking about the pre-teaching and reteaching of core instruction. And then they also identify a progress monitoring part of this strategy as well, knowing that making sure every 6 weeks they're coming back to analyze data to understand their student performance. And another key part of continuous improvement process is the parent, family, and community engagement. And in the administrative policy, it does identify that staff, students, parents, and community participate in the self-review process as well as provide a description of the planning process. So those are requirements that schools have. And so when you think about the universal practices, how do we accomplish that? Some of the ways we do survey our staff, students, and parents through annual climate and program surveys to receive feedback. We also do publish our SIP plans on our school websites and make hard copies available in our school offices. We provide written communication to families. Our principals do that. And we also share information with our PTSAs. Our title schools also have some requirements given their title status, and that's really around inviting families in from underrepresented populations to participate in activities and information sharing. And so all of those are the processes around our continuous improvement.
And the building SIPs will be brought to the board for approval later this month.
Correct.
The SIPs are always something I am ambivalent about, but as long as we're required to do them, I think we do a generally good job of making them useful. The one thing that troubles me sometimes is that the SIPs are entirely about the floor, and I'd like to see at least one bullet point devoted to raising the roof. Moving kids from 3s to 4s. It's all about moving kids up to 3s. For continuous improvement, it would be nice if there was some way to encourage them to include some piece of that. Any other?
Yeah, I just had, on the community engagement, and also there's a few things. In reading your slide really quickly, there was a comment of the equity grid. I was curious what the equity grid was. I've read it in one of your reports.
Yeah, so one of the things that, as our Director of School Support started their continuous improvement process kind of launch in August, they discussed the concept of if we put a face with the name and the data, we're more likely to take it seriously. And so they went through a process to say, who are the students that we're actually talking about? Who are the students that are failing in our schools? And so the equity grid, schools do it different ways, but it's really about taking individual students and saying, okay, how is this student not performing, and what are we doing for him or her so that they can be successful in our school? So it's kind of getting down from
numbers.
We have big district goals, we have school goals, even our teachers, they have their individual goals, but it's getting one step beyond that and saying there's actual individual students that are associated with all of these numbers. Who are they? What's their story, and how do we help them?
Thank you. No, that's great. The other question was around the community engagement. In reading sort of the practices, they were all very one-directional, is what I would say. We send a survey and get input, but there isn't a bi-directional process where there's communication directly with it. There was a little discussion with the Title I. Part of that challenge, I assume, is you're on a one-year strategic plan, annual goal, and I don't know if there's been any, this was, the last time this was discussed is there a capacity to do a longer range, 3 to 5 year SIP, and have annual goals with it, and then you can involve your school community more strongly in that process. I just seemed very one-directional when I read the community input, because providing me this is what it is different than showing the information and saying, how do we collectively impact this as a school through our PTAs, through our nonprofits, through our volunteers who come in with multitude. So that would just be a piece I would look at of how do you expand those engagement capacities in that SIP.
Just a couple of things I would say. I think our table probably doesn't, give full, a full picture maybe of everything that's happening at a school. So I'll just take the title schools as an example. We've got a Title I facilitator who works directly with families. A lot of those, the Natural Leaders Program and the STEM Family Nights are really about that collective impact kind of approach. And I hear what you're saying as well. I think, we've, there's something else now, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but there was one other thing that I wanted to highlight, and it'll come back to me in a moment, hopefully. It was the multi-year piece.
Right.
The other piece is kind of interesting because they're required, just like we do ends results on an annual basis, that's part of our established processes. Buildings do SIPs on an annual basis, and they are really looking at because they have the students from 3rd grade too. So I don't know if we, that we actually talked about it today as we were preparing for this evening. I'm not sure, it has to be done annually, and we do it annually, but that doesn't mean that schools are approaching it like every year's a clean slate, and they really are looking at multi-years, especially given that they've got those same students for multiple years. Do you want to add to anything?
I would just add that I know our schools use our district targets as a way of thinking about multi-year, knowing that this year's 3rd grade group of students is very unique, and so they think about them uniquely as well. And so I would say they do both. They look at the long-term target knowing that that's kind of where we want to be with X grade level, and knowing that this group of students has their strengths and areas of challenge that they want to address that year.
Right, and that's the piece of, I just remember this being in the ends results, and that this was listed as one of the key current strategies being utilized to impact things. And if we looked at those trends, we didn't necessarily see those trends moving as quickly as we would hope. And so are there strategies to strengthen that process down here that can then strengthen that end result that we get at the end? And those are, so when I speak community engagement, it's not that they know the plan or they know that, but actually they're in the process of developing the interventions, the programs, the approaches, so it's a broad, so you actually let the community analyze the data along with the staff in creating that plan. And I think so that's just, I'm putting it out as a strategy in which to look at that parenting community engagement from moving up our participation scale grid.
I think an opportunity of where that's beginning is, so I'll take the district equity team as an example. So as an equity team that includes parents and community members and staff, we're beginning to look at the data, and they're helping to inform the strategies and pathways moving forward. Now, we also have buildings, some buildings already have equity teams, and some are starting to establish equity teams, so we're thinking about this as a multi-year process too, and that's an opportunity for more engagement around the data and helping to inform strategies moving forward. So we have that sort of starting, and I think an opportunity to strengthen that in the years ahead as the district equity team moves forward and the building teams move forward as well. And really those are those are the students. It doesn't necessarily speak to what you're talking about, but it's more focused on the, raising the performance of all students.
It occurs to me that our cities all have events, welcoming events, inclusive events, and it would be interesting, having just come out of a joint session with Sammamish, wish I'd have thought of this earlier, if we could have a presence at some of those events, and obviously it would be a volunteer. I'd be happy to go. But with the cities already doing some work around this inclusion piece, I think it's also probably trying to address some of the gap families that we have, and it might be nice if we could do things together.
Eric. Dr. Holman, one of your slides talked about how there's ongoing monitoring. I think it was slide 18. But what I didn't hear, and I'm wondering if you can talk about, is how at the end of the year, what is our process for evaluating whether the SIP was effective, and how does that feed into the next year?
So I'll answer it two different ways. So progress monitoring is kind of that 6 to 8 week period where you're actually looking at your goals and your data. So that's the ongoing piece. So hopefully a school doesn't get to the end and say, whoops, boy, that really didn't work. So it's looking at your data, it's looking at the strategies on an ongoing basis so that the students you're focusing on are actually receiving that benefit. And then kind of the overall look at the SIP is kind of that August, September. That's kind of the progress monitoring of the overall continuous improvement process plan to say, in general, at the big level, how did we do as a school on our plan, taking all of the data that we receive from our testing, taking our discipline and attendance data from the prior year, taking our school effectiveness data from our surveys around 9 characteristics, and actually using that to talk about what went well, what didn't go well.
Thanks.
Cool. Any other questions? All right, thank you, John. Dr. Pierce, do you have a SOUPS report this evening?
I do, and I'm watching Barbara approach the podium because we're going to take the opportunity during SOUPS report tonight to provide a facilities update. So periodically throughout the year, we're taking the SOUPS report time and providing an update on the 2016 bond project. So that's the focus of the presentation tonight, and I'm going to hand it right over to Barbara so she can get started.
Great. All right, here we go. The last facilities update was provided to the board in August, so this will kind of summarize what's happened since then. Okay, we're continuing to building on success with our projects. We have 8 project sites going right now, and I'll just jump right in and start with Juanita High School. And this is our rebuild and enlarge, and we are planning on opening, it's a phase project which will open in 2020, 1 year earlier than planned. So we're in the construction phase. Since August, we've submitted for our building permits with the City of Kirkland, and we also are starting to procure the bid packages. And then what's coming up in the next few months is continue procurement. Phase 2 of the construction starts in April, and phase 1, we brought in portables, so we demolished a portion of the building in the summer and brought in portables, and then the remaining number of portables, 10 portables, will be brought in for the next phase in June. These are just some artist renderings of the entrance to the school. These are pictures of the construction site, and the picture on the lower right is a pathway that has been, paved pathway that has been built between the construction area. So, okay, moving on to Explorer. Explorer is our 4 modular building campus that was opened this fall. And so we have occupancy for this project. So the occupancy was completed in August. Students arrived in September, very excited. We had our grand opening ceremony, and then they had some final, they installed the covered play canopy, and then we expect to close the project out in February. So here are some pictures of the ribbon cutting and the modules in the covered area. So moving on to our 2 new elementary schools. The first one in North Redmond, that is planning to open this fall. And we're in the construction phase. The permits were issued in August. We had our structural steel topping out ceremony. That's when the last steel beam is placed in October. We had power put to the site in December. And then so what's upcoming is interior drywall installation, geothermal well drilling. I'll just skip that. Interior installation of doors, flooring, and casework begins in March. So here's some pictures of the steel, and then you can see walls and other pictures. The top picture is the wells that were put in. So Redmond Ridge East, also opening fall of 2018. Building permit was issued in August. They had their structural steel topping out ceremony in December. They will have their utility connections this month, fiber lines installed, and the building envelope will be complete. And the building envelope means roof and walls, so it's dry to the rain is what that means. So here's some pictures of the topping out. Oops. One more picture just showing the roofing and the walls being put on. Okay, the new middle school at Redmond Ridge, planned for fall of 2019. We're in the construction phase, and the building permit was issued in October. Geothermal wells, November. Structural steel, the topping out ceremony was in December. Lots of ceremonies in December. And then the building envelope construction begins in January, and the geothermal wells in February. Some more pictures. And I would encourage anybody, if you haven't driven by these locations, to drive by, because they are changing. These pictures are already out of date, right, for us? So things are moving very quickly. It's exciting. Okay, Peter Kirk Elementary School, another rebuild and enlarge, and that is planned to open in the fall of 19. And they are in the construction permitting. And so we've working on multiple permits needed for this project. That was done in the fall. And then right now we're beginning procurement of the construction bid packages, and hopefully construction will start in April. There's some design rendering of Kirk. And then moving on to Margaret Mead, also opening in fall of 2019. Also in the construction and permitting process. So this fall, they're gonna also do procurement of bid packages and hope to start construction in April. So there's the Mead design. And then Old Redmond Schoolhouse is the project that will also, another project opening in fall of 19, remodeling that for a preschool program. And we are in design development, and we have continued coordination with the city on the building program related to historic buildings. And the city is moving out, hopes to vacate the building by March, April, and so we're preparing for construction with the city, and then we'll be submitting our building permit in April and May. So there's some pictures of the community, Old Redmond Schoolhouse. So next I'm going to give a construction program update, and a lot of this information was also shared in August, but it's always a good idea to continue to inform. So as far as the program costs update, we are monitoring costs and estimates on a regular basis. As we shared in August, that the Puget Sound Marketplace is the third most expensive construction market in the nation and sixth in the world. We are actively partnering with our GCCM construction partners to value engineer cost savings to mitigate this escalation. We're seeing, labor shortages and, improvements, increasing requirements by our jurisdictions for traffic, and seismic changes and water quality control measures are all driving increased costs. But we are working very hard with intentional cost control measures to offset these increasing market-driven costs. Our bond program did include almost 20 million of program contingency, and that is going to be used to cover fiber networks, site-specific issues, inflation, offset those jurisdictional requirements and market conditions. We are expecting to also earn $2 million more in interest earnings, and we've received $3 million more in impact fees than originally estimated. So our ongoing challenges, we'll be using that individual project contingency to offset those market conditions. We do, as part of our bond program, we had planned $21 million in state construction assistance. Many people have asked what the impact of the delay of the passage of the capital budget. The good news for us is we were planning those dollars at the end of our project.
Just for clarity for anybody who's watching, it's the state
capital budget. Thank you, that's a good clarification, not the district's budget, but the state's capital budget has not, the legislature still needs to pass that, and we've received a lot of questions on what the impact is to our district. And the state construction assistance funds were expected at the end of our project, so it is not causing us to have to delay projects. So it still could create a cash flow challenge because it is received at the end. And again, continued unforeseen market escalation could drive up cost estimates for our remaining projects. So we shared in August, again, these are all the things that we're doing to reduce our risk and save money and ensure that we are within budget. And I won't read all of those, but I'll highlight a few things. And one of the first bullets is the Design and Construction Advisory Committee. And I've got some slides to talk a little bit about that more in detail. I mentioned continuing value engineering. We have multiple reviews by independent cost estimators, outside parties, and then we are, multiple peer reviews to make sure that we are our costs are appropriate. So talking about the Design Advisory Committee, this was a committee that was formed in 2016 as a outcome of our long-term planning task force. It's a committee of industry experts, and they help and again, so the members are listed up there: Eric Campbell, Main Street Property Group, Gid Palmer from Microsoft Real Estate, Jay Halloran, Lise Crusher-Lewis, Lee Gilcup, GLY Construction, and Dale Cody with the Lake Washington School District. So the committee responsibility is really—
Barbara, I'm sorry, I'm just going to interject one thing if you go to the previous slide. So this group is the group that meet with Forest.
Yeah,
so we don't have Forest listed
yeah, let me
here
give you some context. So the meeting, the group, Forest and the construction design team presents their designs and meets with this group through the schematic and design process. And this group provides advice and really pushes back on the district to say, do you really need to do this? Can you do it a different way? So that is the role of this.
Yeah, they're really a critical friend. I mean, we, of course, are wanting to keep costs contained and avoid costs as well. And Forrest and his team are really good at that.
Yep.
And one of the recommendations for how we can even enhance that further came from the Long-Term Facility Planning Task Force, that having this group of industry outside eyes would be helpful to our internal team.
Absolutely.
to play that critical friend role, just as Barbara described.
Right.
So Forrest meets with this team, and then Barbara's going to talk about what the team's role is, what the responsibilities, and what are some of the real cost avoidance outcomes that we've been able to accomplish through this team.
Okay, so we've talked about their objectives of third-party analysis of the design and decision-making process, focus on efficient and effective use of public funds. So I'll just get to some recommendations that the committee has made. And as Tracy mentioned, this is something the district does on a day-to-day basis, but this committee is there to also ask additional questions. And so looking at site layouts, making sure they're simplified, reducing building volume, simplify roofs, look at building exteriors, reducing undue complexity in the building materials and systems. Those are just a few. Again, I'm not going to read all of those, but those are just a few of the things that this committee is asking questions and saying, here's, and providing guidance on, maybe this is a better way to do it, or can we save money if we do this, that type of thing. So the last slide is, well, this isn't the last slide on the Design Advisory Committee. This is a table that shows, lists each project and the cost avoidance due to the advisory committee recommendations. So I'll just give you some examples. Juanita High School, we phased that, initially that project was going to open in fall of 21, and it was going to be a rebuild, but when they, it's a rebuild, but as we do our normal projects, we build it behind the other campus. When we looked at how could we do Juanita differently, the idea of phasing was coming, it was brought about. So can we demolish certain parts of the building, bring in portables, and do it in phased? And we were able to do that and actually open it a year earlier. So that was, and that saved $21 million, along with all those other things on the list. Another example is at Redmond Ridge East Elementary. The original design that was brought to the committee was really spread out, had many single-story elements, and so the design committee said, hey, can we, again, make those single-story elements multi-story, and so that was able to, that and along with other things, were able to provide cost avoidance of $3.5 million at Redmond Ridge East. So overall, for all of our projects at this time, we've identified approximately $43.7 million of cost avoidance measures. Now, that is, what are those savings offsetting? As I mentioned, we're seeing significant market escalation. So without these cost-saving measures, it would be very challenging on our construction budgets. But so these cost avoidance measures really offset our construction escalation. They offset our jurisdictional requirements for traffic. They offset code changes for seismic and water, stormwater quality. So all of those things. So it's a really compliment to our facilities team that the hard work that they're doing for these projects. So moving on to communication. So here's what we're doing on a regular basis to communicate to our community members what we're doing with these bond projects. We sent an informational mailer to all district households in September. We have monthly bond e-news updates. Since August, we've hosted 12 Facebook Live broadcasts, which show the milestones of construction, like those topping out ceremonies, and those have received over 40,000 views. We have answers to frequently asked questions on our website. We continue to update the photography and video stories on our projects and our websites and our social media. So our focus is making sure we're keeping our community updated on our projects, getting information out through Facebook and things. And and then just more information. We have a Building on Success page on our website. If community members have questions, they can click Let's Talk and get their questions answered. They can go there to get project reports, project information. Community members can also go to this website to sign up to receive e-newsletters on updates for projects. So that's all the things. And again, our communications department works really hard to get this information out and ensure that our public knows what we're doing and what we're doing with our 26 bond that they so generously passed last year.
Quick question.
2016. 2016.
Yep.
Quick question. I'm not sure if we even have the answer to this, but we're increasing capacity at Juanita High School to 1,400 students?
It's 1,800.
Okay, we're at 1,400. We're moving to 1,800. And my question is, are we increasing parking spaces for the new building? Not dealing with what we're dealing with right now, but when the new building opens.
Good question.
I don't have.
Why don't we follow
we can
up
get
on that?
that.
Why don't we
That's
get
fine.
some
Thank
information
you.
and then I'll follow up with the board. Thanks.
Okay.
Good call. Any other questions? Well, again, yeah, it's getting more expensive to build buildings. So good job working with the team on the cost avoidance measures, and B, how much are we paying this team? Brilliant. No, just tell them thank you so much for their help, because it's truly invaluable. So,
We will.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the end of the SUPS report, right? Correct. Fantastic, which brings us to Ledge report. Mark, is the legislature in business?
Well, they're in. Not sure what kind of business they're in, but they're in.
Yeah, I was afraid of that.
Monkey business, perhaps. Anyway, we spent the last week meeting with all of our legislative reps and senators. We had some very good meetings, very insightful. It was interesting to see that virtually all of them agreed that we have to get the construction budget passed, the facilities budget, whatever. Unfortunately, all the shortfalls, I think for every person we had come in, they had a different financial solution to how to skin the cat, which is interesting because all of them are the same party. But that said, I think it's just a matter of perspective on which committee you're on and where you can see what actually works and what doesn't. I think we will see a capital budget rather quickly. The question is that there's a subpart to it called the bond, and that could be a bear. And if that doesn't get passed, it doesn't matter if the other gets passed. And for that good news, other than that, it's all right.
All right, then. Fortunately, it's a short session, so this won't go on into June, right?
Maybe. Place your bets, place your bets.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions for Mark on this? Thank you to you guys who were able to get down there for that. It is important to lobby our representatives. Yeah. Well, to work with them on it. That brings us to basically board follow-up, closing comments.
I just
Brief?
have a few things, just,
Go for it.
and actually it sort of builds off the ledge stuff. Jessica Vazquez is the government relations person through WASDA, and she puts out a very good update, so make sure to look at the WASDA page under legislative advocacy work, so there's a lot of really good, just to sort of keep what's going and sort of keeps a good running tally of bills and different things if you're interested. And there is also the Legislative Assembly that will be happening on January 26th and 27th, 28th and 29th, Sunday, Monday. I would encourage, I know Mark and I are signed up, I would assume Tracy is signed up?
Yeah, district staff, so Barbara and John and I will all be going to the Sunday session and then coming back.
So
Sunday night.
I would encourage anyone else to go. It's a great opportunity to hear sort of what's happening in the legislature, hear from Chris Reichdahl, our superintendent of OSPI, and just get sort of the whole state feel of what's going on and the opportunity to really sort of dive into some of those topics.
As a follow-up to that, I'll be participating in the federal outreach in February. So we'll be going and meeting with our congressional delegation in DC.
Excellent. All right. Any other comments? Eric, you might be about to get your wish. So our next board meeting is Monday, January 22nd at 5:30 here in the boardroom. We'll have a study session in here. Am I?
Yeah, so it's
Oh, yeah, okay.
funny because just to remind everybody, we haven't actually had a 5:30 board meeting for a number of months
Thank you.
because we've had boundary and all sorts of
Yes.
things. So this is the first time in a long time
We've been back onto normal.
where we do a short board meeting, consent agenda items only, and then do the longer study session here in the boardroom.
Okay, fantastic. So that's our next board meeting. There's a Saturday, January 27th, we've got our January study session. And we'll be talking about policy governance and some of the board processes. That again will be here in the boardroom. And that brings me to, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Right before that
Sarah's got one more
motion, I'm
thing.
sorry, I could hold you
That's
till
fine.
9, Eric. is you were recently sent, I think it was last week, I want to make sure it didn't get lost in the email, the WASDA board self-evaluation using all the standards and doing that, and that was to be completed by the 12th. Part of that's will be utilized at that Saturday work session, and so it'll be important to have it done by the 12th so we can get that information back. We've done it now for the last 2 years, and this is actually the assessment that Cassandra saw the presentation on around the effectiveness of solid boards and utilizing these standards in which to really impact improvement. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to be able to continue utilizing that information.
Thank you for the reminder. All right, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Director Bleasner, seconded by Director Liberty. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, hearing none, motion carries. Meeting adjourned.